My husband drained our son's cancer treatment fund and ran off with his mistress. I found out at the hospital billing office, staring at a screen that showed $0 where $73,000 should have been. Without payment, we'll have to postpone Ethan's chemotherapy, the coordinator said gently, and I felt my world collapse. That's when my 16-year-old daughter squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mom, don't worry." I handled it. I thought she was trying to comfort me. I had no idea what she'd actually done. 3 days later, my husband called, screaming, but it started earlier than that. It started the morning I found Peter packing. I walked into our bedroom at 6:47 a.m., still half asleep, coffee mug in hand. Peter was throwing clothes into a suitcase. No explanation, no eye contact, just frantic packing like the house was on fire. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't even look up. "I'm starting over, Willa. I should have done this months ago." Starting over, like our life together was a failed project, like our dying son was something to walk away from and try again. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers. I barely heard it shatter against the hardwood. 14 years. We'd been married for 14 years and it was ending like this. Him cramming wrinkled dress shirts into luggage while I stood frozen in my pajamas, trying to understand how I'd missed every sign that led to this moment. "Peter, stop." I moved toward him, reached for his arm. "Talk to me. What's happening?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes were empty. Not angry, not sad, just blank, like he'd already left weeks ago and his body was only now catching up. "I'm leaving today." My mother's voice echoed in my head, something she'd said 2 months after Ethan's diagnosis. We'd been folding laundry in her living room while Ethan napped upstairs, and she'd said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. "Did you know that in families with childhood cancer, the divorce rate is close to 80%? Most of the time, it's the fathers who leave. They just can't handle it." I'd gotten angry with her, told her Peter wasn't like that. Peter was a pediatric surgeon, for God's sake. He saved children's lives for a living. He would never abandon his own son. She'd given me this sad, knowing look and said, "I hope you're right, sweetheart. I really do." Now, standing in my bedroom watching my husband pack, I heard her voice like she was standing right next to me. Most of the time, it's the fathers who leave. This can't be real. My voice came out strange, distant. "Yesterday, we were at Dr. Mendola's office. You held my hand during the consultation. You promised—" "I know what I promised." Peter zipped the suitcase. The sound was so final. "But I can't do this anymore." "Can't do what?" "Be a father, be a husband, can't watch him die." The words came out flat, matter of fact. I've seen it too many times, Willa. In my practice, I've watched parents go through this, and I know how it ends. The suffering, the false hope. I can't be one of those parents. I won't. "He's not dying," I said, but my voice shook. "Dr. Mendola said the new treatment plan is promising. The tumor is responding. The tumor is growing." Peter picked up his suitcase. "I saw the latest scans. It's in his lymph nodes now, stage 3, probably stage 4 by next month. And I'm supposed to just stand there and watch my son waste away while we pump him full of poison that's only buying us time." "So you're running away?" I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. "I'm surviving." He walked past me toward the door. "Someone has to." Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing stories about protecting our families. If you believe children deserve to be protected, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more families who need to hear this. I followed my husband into the hallway, my bare feet cold against the floor, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. "Is there someone else?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Peter froze at the top of the stairs. Just for a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or just irritation at being caught. This isn't about anyone else, but deep down I already knew. You can feel it before you see it. The phone always face down. The emergency surgeries at odd hours. The way he'd started showering immediately when he got home, instead of giving Ethan his bedtime hug first. The way he'd stopped touching me altogether, like I was contaminated by grief and he might catch it. "You're lying," I spat, my voice breaking with fury. "I'm trying to stay sane," he shot back, "which is more than you're doing. You've completely lost yourself in this, Willa. You don't sleep, you barely eat, you spend every waking moment either at the hospital or researching treatment options online. You're not living anymore. You're just waiting for the worst to happen. I'm fighting for our son. You're drowning, he said quietly. And I can't drown with you. Peter started down the stairs, and that's when my daughter Sophie's door opened. She stood in the hallway in her school uniform, dark hair already pulled back in a neat ponytail, backpack over one shoulder, like it was any other morning. Like her father wasn't walking out on us. Her eyes moved from Peter with his suitcase to me with tears streaming down my face. No shock registered on her face, no surprise at all. "Dad," she said calmly, "where are you going?" Peter stopped halfway down the stairs. "Sophie, sweetheart, this is between your mother and me. It doesn't— Where's Ethan's treatment money?" The question dropped like a bomb. Peter's face went blank. "What?" "The cancer fund," Sophie said, and her voice was so steady it scared me. "The $73,412 in the medical savings account. Where is it?" Ice flooded my veins. "Sophie, what are you talking about?" But she was staring at her father, and something passed between them, some understanding I wasn't part of. "That's not your concern," Peter said, and I heard fear in his voice now. Sophie pulled out her phone, tapped the screen twice, and held it up. Even from where I stood, I could see the bank statement, the account name, and at the bottom, in stark black numbers, balance $0. No, the word barely made it out. "No, that's not possible. I checked that account last week. There was $73,412, Sophie finished. There was, until 3 days ago when it was transferred to an account at a different bank. An account in someone else's name. The hallway tilted. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. "How did you access that account?" Peter demanded. "Answer her question," Sophie said, and I'd never heard that tone from my daughter before. Cold, controlled, dangerous. "Where is Ethan's cancer money?" "That account was for Ethan's medical expenses," I heard myself saying, my voice rising. "Peter, tell me you couldn't have." He looked at me then, and I saw it. Guilt, shame, and underneath both, defiance. "I needed it temporarily," he said. "I was going to replace it before Friday." "For what?" I was screaming now. "What could you possibly need that money for?" "A down payment." The words came out fast, defensive. "Rebecca and I found a condo in Westlake Village. We needed cash for the down payment. And once the sale of my share of the practice goes through," the words stopped making sense. Rebecca, condo down payment. My husband had stolen our dying son's cancer treatment fund to buy a home with. "Who's Rebecca?" I said, each word measured, deliberate. Peter's eyes flickered to Sophie, then back to me. "Someone who doesn't make me feel guilty every second of every day. Someone who lets me breathe." I moved before I thought. My hand connected with his face with a crack that echoed through the house. We both froze, my palm stinging, his cheek reddening. "You stole from your own son," I said, my voice tight with fury. "From Ethan! While he's fighting for his life, you stole the money that's supposed to save him." Peter jerked away from me, grabbed his suitcase from where he'd dropped it. "My lawyer will contact you about the divorce," he said without looking at me. "All communication goes through legal counsel from now on. Don't try to call me." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than if he'd slammed it. I stood in my entryway, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of impossible information. My husband had left me. He'd stolen from our son. He had someone named Rebecca, and they'd bought a condo together while Ethan was being poisoned with chemotherapy drugs. "Mom?" Sophie's voice seemed to come from very far away. I turned and saw her on the stairs, watching me with careful eyes. "Mom, you need to sit down." "Ethan's treatment," I heard myself say. "It's on Friday. Dr. Mendola said we absolutely cannot delay it. The tumor's growing too fast. If we miss this round—" "I know." Sophie came down the stairs, took my arm, guided me to the couch. "Mom, I know, but I need you to listen to me right now." I sat, stared at my daughter, the stranger with my eyes and my dark hair, but something else entirely in her expression, something sharp and knowing and far too old for 16. "What is it?" I whispered. Sophie took both my hands in hers, squeezed gently. "Mom, don't worry," she said. "I handled it. I looked at my daughter like she'd spoken a foreign language. What do you mean you handled it? I mean, Sophie said carefully, that I've known about Dad and Rebecca for 5 months, and I've been preparing for this 5 months. While I'd been focused on Ethan's treatment schedules, his medication side effects, his good days and bad days, my daughter had been carrying this knowledge alone. Sophie, I don't understand. How could you have— Dad's iPad syncs with his phone. She said it so calmly. Same Apple ID. His password is Ethan's birthday plus the year you guys got married. Not exactly creative. My brain couldn't process what she was telling me. You've been reading your father's messages? Every single one. Sophie stood up and walked to her backpack by the door. She pulled out a thick manila folder and brought it back to me. For 5 months, I've been documenting everything. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The first page was a printed text message exchange between Peter and someone named Rebecca Lynn. My eyes blurred as I read them. Peter complaining about how hard it was to watch Ethan suffer. This Rebecca woman telling him he deserved happiness, that he should stop watching if it hurt too much. Telling him we'd all be fine without him. Message after message of her convincing him to leave. Message after message of him working up the courage to abandon his family. Sophie had documented everything. Every conversation where they planned their future together. Every time Rebecca told Peter he was sacrificing too much for a lost cause. That's what they called my son, a lost cause. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the folder. Keep reading, Sophie said quietly. Bank statements I'd never seen before. A new account Peter had opened without telling me. Transfers from our joint savings. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Then, 3 days ago, the big one. $73,412.67 from Ethan's medical fund. He's been planning this for months, I whispered. Since February, Sophie confirmed. That's when he opened the secret account. He's been siphoning money little by little, and 3 days ago he took the rest, everything. I flipped to the next section and found real estate listings. A condo in Westlake Village, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, mountain views, listed at $425,000, and a purchase agreement signed by Peter Walters and Rebecca Lynn, dated 1 week ago. My husband had bought a home with another woman while our son was dying. How did you get all this? I asked. Some of it was from Dad's iPad. The rest I got from Rebecca. Sophie pulled out her phone and opened it to show me a series of text messages, but the contact name made my breath catch. It said, Pete. You've been texting with her? She thinks I'm Dad. Sophie scrolled through the conversation and I caught the faintest hint of a smile. The same mischievous look she used to get when she was 7 and figured out how to pick the lock on the cookie jar, back when her cleverness was used for sneaking dessert. I created a new number using a texting app, told her Dad's phone was broken and he was using a backup. She never questioned it. Sophie's smile widened slightly. I've been texting with her for 3 weeks, getting her to tell me everything about their plans. I stared at my daughter, the little girl who used to crawl into my lap with picture books, who used to ask me to check for monsters under her bed. When had she learned to become the monster under someone else's bed? Sophie, you can't just— I couldn't finish the sentence because the truth was I didn't know my daughter anymore. I thought I'd been raising a normal teenager who complained about homework and spent too much time on TikTok. Instead, I'd somehow raised someone who could catfish her father's mistress without breaking a sweat. Mom, I know that look. Sophie's smile faded. You're scared of me right now. She set down her phone and looked at me with those serious eyes. My eyes, everyone always said, but there was something in them now that had never been in mine. Something harder. Remember when I was 10 and those girls at school were bullying me? Sophie asked quietly. You told me that sometimes the only way to stop bad people from hurting you is to make sure they can't. You said being nice doesn't work on people who've decided you don't matter. I did remember. Sophie had come home crying for weeks until I'd finally sat her down and told her she needed to stand up for herself. I'd meant she should tell a teacher, maybe find new friends. I hadn't meant for her to learn how to bury her enemies. I learned that lesson, Mom, Sophie said. Maybe too well. Do you want to know what else I found out? I wasn't sure I could handle more, but I nodded. Rebecca works for Mercer Pharmaceuticals. She's a sales rep who calls on doctors' offices, including Dad's practice. They met 18 months ago at a medical conference in San Diego. She's 32, divorced, no kids, and she's been stealing medication samples from the doctors she visits and selling them online. What? Sophie pulled up another folder on her phone. Screenshots of listings on some kind of marketplace. Prescription medications listed for sale, posted by an account called MedSource 2023. I tracked her IP address, Sophie said. It's Rebecca's home Wi-Fi. She's been stealing high-value meds, cancer drugs actually, and selling them for cash. I estimate she's made about $40,000 in the last month. My mind reeled. How did you learn how to do all this? YouTube, mostly. Reddit forums. It's not that hard if you know where to look. She scrolled through more files. I also found out she's been submitting false expense reports to her company, claiming meals and travel that never happened. That's another $38,000 she's stolen from Mercer. Sophie, I grabbed her shoulders. What are you planning to do with all this information? She looked at me with those calm, serious eyes. I was going to expose everything, send it all to the authorities, to Rebecca's company, to Dad's practice, destroy them both. She paused. But then I realized something. What? If I do it all at once, Dad might find a way to fight back. He has money, connections, a good lawyer probably already lined up. Sophie closed the folder. So I'm going to do it strategically, one piece at a time. Make them think each problem is separate, unrelated. By the time they realize someone's orchestrating it, it'll be too late. My stomach churned. Sophie, this is the only way to protect Ethan. Her voice was firm. Mom, we have 2 days until his treatment. 2 days to figure out how to pay for it. And Dad just stole every penny we had. She was right. The righteous anger I felt toward my daughter's ruthlessness evaporated in the face of cold reality. My son needed chemotherapy on Friday, and we had $247 in our checking account. What's your plan? I asked. Sophie pulled out her laptop and opened it. First, I need you to file a fraud report with the bank. Today, right now. You're the primary account holder on Ethan's medical fund. If you report the unauthorized withdrawal, they're required to freeze the investigation. Will that get the money back? Eventually. But not by Friday. She pulled up a document. That's why step 2 is filing an emergency complaint with the state medical board. Dad's a licensed physician who stole medical funds from his own minor child. There's a victim compensation fund for exactly this situation. How long does that take? The website says 3 to 5 business days for emergency cases. Sophie's face was grim, which means it might not come through before Friday. My heart sank. So Ethan might miss his treatment anyway. Not if we have a backup plan. Sophie pulled up another tab. I've been researching charity organizations that help families with pediatric cancer costs. St. Jude has an emergency assistance program, and there's a local foundation that specifically helps families in our county. I stared at the list of organizations she'd compiled. You've been planning this for how long? 3 weeks, since I saw Dad looking at that bank statement. Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact. I knew he was going to take it. I just didn't know when. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the front window, I could see a car I didn't recognize in our driveway. Are you expecting anyone? Sophie asked. I shook my head and walked to the door. When I opened it, I found myself face to face with a woman I'd never met. She was pretty, probably in her early 30s, with carefully styled blonde hair and expensive-looking clothes. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying. Are you Willa? She asked. I'm Rebecca Lynn. She said it like I should know the name, like she wasn't the woman who'd just destroyed my family. I need to talk to you about Peter. Behind me, I heard Sophie's sharp intake of breath. Rebecca must have taken my stunned silence as permission because she kept talking. Look, I know this is awkward, but Peter just called me absolutely hysterical. He said his accounts are frozen and he can't access any of his money, and she paused, studying my face. Wait, did you do that? I filed a fraud report, I said, finding my voice. For the money he stole from our son's cancer treatment fund. Rebecca's face went pale. He said it was his money from selling his share of the practice. He said, she stopped. Oh my God, he lied to me. About a lot of things, apparently, Sophie said, appearing beside me. She had her phone in her hand, and I realized she was recording. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Who are you? His daughter? The one whose brother is dying while you and my dad play house. Sophie's voice was ice. Something shifted in Rebecca's expression. Fear, maybe, or calculation. I didn't know he stole from a cancer fund, Rebecca said quickly. Peter told me that money was from his practice buyout. He said his partners were paying him out over time, and he was just accelerating the schedule. I would never have... But you did know he was married, I interrupted. You knew he had a sick child. You knew all of that, and you pursued him anyway. It's not that simple. Rebecca's voice rose defensively. Peter came to me. He was unhappy, drowning in stress, and I listened. I was there for him when you weren't. I was taking care of our dying son. The words came out like knives. Rebecca flinched. I know, and I'm sorry about that, I really am, but Peter needs support too. He's been falling apart for months, and... Ma'am, Sophie interrupted, her phone still recording. Have you been selling stolen pharmaceutical samples online under the username MedSource 2023? Rebecca's face went white. What? How do you... Because I have screenshots of over 200 listings traced back to your IP address, cancer medications specifically. The same drugs my brother needs to stay alive. Sophie's voice was deadly calm. So I'm going to ask you again. Have you been stealing medication samples and selling them for profit? That's insane, Rebecca sputtered. I would never. Then you won't mind if I share this evidence with your employer? Rebecca's hands started shaking. You can't prove anything. I can prove everything. Sophie held up her phone. I have your IP address, your sales records, communications with buyers, everything, and I'm giving you one chance to help us. Help you how? Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. Tell us where Dad transferred the money, I said. The $73,000 from Ethan's account. Where did it go? Rebecca looked between us, trapped. I don't know. Peter handles all the finances. We needed the down payment for the condo, and he said he had it covered. What bank is the condo account with? Sophie pressed. First Pacific, but I don't know the account number. That's enough. Sophie was already typing on her phone. Thank you for confirming the bank. Now I can file a specific fraud report. Rebecca's face crumbled. Please. I didn't know he stole from a sick child. I swear I didn't know. If I'd known, you need to leave, I said. Rebecca backed away from the door. This is all a huge misunderstanding, Peter said. Peter says a lot of things, Sophie interrupted. Most of them are lies. You should probably figure that out sooner rather than later. Rebecca practically ran back to her car. We watched her drive away in silence. Did you get everything? I asked. Sophie nodded, stopping the recording. Her confession about the condo account is on tape, and the way she didn't deny the pharmaceutical theft. That's admissible too. You set that whole thing up, I realized. You knew she'd come here. I texted her from Dad's fake number this morning, Sophie admitted, told her there was a misunderstanding with the bank and asked her to come talk to you directly to smooth things over. I knew she'd panic and try to protect herself. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a surge of pride at my daughter's strategic thinking. What now? I asked. Now we wait. Sophie checked her phone. I submitted the medical board complaint an hour ago. The bank fraud report will take 24 hours to process, and I just sent Rebecca's confession to Mercer Pharmaceuticals' ethics hotline. What about Ethan's treatment? I'm calling the charity organizations this afternoon. I'll explain the situation, see if any of them can fast-track emergency assistance. Sophie met my eyes. We're going to make this work, Mom. Even if I have to burn down Dad's entire life to do it. My phone buzzed with a text from Peter. We need to talk. Rebecca is hysterical and threatening to go to the police. What did you say to her? I showed Sophie the message. Don't respond, she said immediately. Let him panic. The more scared he is, the more mistakes he'll make. But then my phone rang, Peter's name flashing on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. What did you do to Rebecca? Peter's voice was frantic. She just called me crying, saying you accused her of stealing drugs, and I didn't accuse her of anything, I said calmly. Sophie just asked her some questions. Questions about the pharmaceutical samples she's been selling online. Silence. Then, Willa, you need to back off. You're upset about the money, I understand that, but dragging Rebecca into this. You dragged Rebecca into this when you stole from our son to buy her a condo. My voice was steel. Every consequence you're facing right now, you earned it. I will fight you on this, Peter said, his panic shifting to anger. I'll get lawyers, I'll contest the fraud claim, You'll what, Peter? Explain to a judge why you stole $73,000 from your dying son's medical account? Please, go ahead. I'm sure that will go great for you. Willa, I'm done talking to you. Any further communication goes through lawyers. Isn't that what you said? I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt stronger than I had in months, maybe years. Sophie was watching me with something like respect. That was good, Mom. I learned from the best, I said, and this time I meant it. The next 48 hours were a blur. I filed paperwork, made phone calls, contacted charity organizations, and tried to keep it together for Ethan, who had no idea his father had left or that his treatment was in jeopardy. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from a restricted number. Mrs. Walters, this is Detective Sarah Morrison with the Financial Crimes Division. I need to ask you some questions about a fraud report you filed regarding a medical savings account. My heart stopped. Is something wrong? On the contrary, your daughter Sophie submitted quite a comprehensive complaint to the state medical board, who forwarded it to us. The evidence she provided is extensive. There was a pause. I need you to come down to the station tomorrow morning to make a formal statement. Can you do that? Yes, of course. Good. And Mrs. Walters? Bring your daughter. After I hung up, Sophie looked up from her laptop where she'd been researching more charity options. Who was that? The police. They want to talk to us tomorrow about your fraud complaint. Sophie's face went carefully neutral. Are they investigating Dad or me? I don't know. And suddenly, I was terrified. What if Sophie's methods of gathering evidence were illegal? What if trying to save our family got her in trouble instead? As if reading my mind, Sophie said quietly, everything I accessed was either on Dad's synced devices, publicly available information, or given to me voluntarily by Rebecca during a recorded conversation. I didn't hack anything. I didn't break any laws. Are you sure? Pretty sure. She didn't sound as confident as she usually did. I researched it pretty carefully, but I'm not a lawyer. We needed a lawyer. We needed help. This was spiraling into something bigger than either of us could handle alone. My phone buzzed. An email from Maria Santos at the State Medical Board. Mrs. Walters, your emergency compensation request is still being processed. However, due to the complexity of your case and the ongoing criminal investigation, there may be delays in releasing funds. I recommend securing alternative payment arrangements for Friday's treatment. I'm sorry I can't provide better news at this time. My stomach dropped. Friday was tomorrow. We'd run out of time. Sophie, I said, my voice shaking, the emergency fund isn't coming through. We have to cancel Ethan's treatment. My daughter's face went white. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw real fear in her eyes. No, she whispered. No, I had a plan. I had everything figured out. This was supposed to work. I know, baby. I pulled her into my arms. You did everything you could. This isn't your fault. It is my fault, she sobbed. I waited too long. I should have done something sooner. I should have. The doorbell rang. We both looked at each other, confused. It was 8 p.m. Who would be here at 8 p.m.? I opened the door to find my mother standing there with a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Mom, what are you doing here? I heard what Peter did, she said, walking inside without waiting for an invitation. And I called in a favor. The man in the suit extended his hand. Mrs. Walters, I'm James Chen. I'm a family law attorney specializing in medical fraud and asset recovery. Your mother explained your situation, and I'd like to help. I can't afford pro bono, he interrupted. I lost my own son to leukemia 10 years ago. I know what it's like when the system fails families in crisis. That's why I do this work now. I couldn't speak, could only stare at this stranger offering us a lifeline. I've already reviewed the evidence your daughter compiled, James continued, pulling out his briefcase. It's exceptional work. With your permission, I'd like to file an emergency motion tomorrow morning for immediate asset seizure and fund recovery. If the judge agrees, and I think she will, we can have that money released by tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon? Sophie's voice was small, hopeful. Before Ethan's treatment? That's the goal. James looked at her seriously. But I need your help. I need you to walk me through every piece of evidence, every timeline, every connection you made. Can you do that? Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, I can do that. Good. James set his briefcase on our kitchen table and opened it. Then, let's get to work. We have until court opens at 9 a.m. tomorrow to build an airtight case. We worked through the night. James spread Sophie's evidence across our kitchen table like a general planning a battle. Documents, screenshots, timelines, everything my daughter had meticulously collected over 5 months. This is remarkable, James said for the third time, studying Sophie's spreadsheet tracking Peter's account transfers. But here's our problem. Some of this evidence, the texts between your father and Rebecca that you accessed through his iPad, a defense attorney could argue that's a violation of privacy. My stomach dropped. Does that mean we can't use it? It means we have to be strategic about what we present and how we present it. James tapped his pen against the table. The financial records are solid. You're the primary account holder, Willa, so you have legal right to access those. The condo purchase agreement is public record. Rebecca's confession on tape is voluntary and admissible. What about the pharmaceutical theft? Sophie asked. That's trickier. How did you discover her sales operation? Sophie hesitated. I may have used some IP tracking tools that aren't exactly mainstream. Did you hack her computer? No, I just tracked publicly available sale listings back to their source. It's not illegal to notice patterns. James studied her. You're either the smartest teenager I've ever met or the most dangerous, maybe both. He turned to me. The judge we're seeing tomorrow, Judith Reeves. She's tough but fair. She has 3 kids of her own. If we can make her understand the urgency of Ethan's treatment, she'll move heaven and earth to help us. If, I asked. There's always an if, Mrs. Walters. Your husband will have representation too, and once he realizes what we're doing, he's going to fight back hard. At 2 a.m., my mother forced us all to take a break. She made coffee and sandwiches that no one really ate. Sophie had dark circles under her eyes, but she refused to rest. I can't sleep anyway, she said. Not until I know Ethan's treatment is secured. James checked his watch. Court opens in 7 hours. I need to file the emergency motion by 8 a.m. to get on tomorrow's docket. Mrs. Walters, I'll need you to sign several documents authorizing me to act on your behalf. He slid papers across the table. Affidavits, petitions, authorizations. I signed them all with shaking hands, each signature feeling like a small act of war against the man I'd once loved. At 3 a.m., James finally left to prepare the formal filing. My mother took Sophie upstairs and forced her to lie down, at least, even if she couldn't sleep. I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, and let myself cry. Really cry, for the first time since Peter had walked out. Not quiet tears, but ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside me. This was supposed to be the easy part. Peter and I were supposed to be a team. We were supposed to face Ethan's cancer together, holding each other up when one of us was weak. Instead, I was sitting in my kitchen at 3 a.m., preparing to go to war with my own husband to save our son's life. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You're making a huge mistake. Back off before this gets ugly. Rebecca was threatening me. I should have been scared. Instead, I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Peter and Rebecca had underestimated us. They thought we'd just roll over, accept their betrayal, let them walk away with our money and our dignity. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I forwarded the text to James with a note. More evidence for tomorrow. His response came immediately. Perfect. Threatening a victim is never a good look. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. I didn't sleep. By 6 a.m., I was showered and dressed in the most professional outfit I owned. A navy suit I'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago and never worn. I looked like someone going to court, which I guess I was. Sophie came downstairs at 6:30, also dressed carefully. She'd straightened her hair and put on minimal makeup. She looked older, more serious. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if the judge doesn't believe us? What if Dad convinces them we're making this up? We have evidence. We have truth on our side. Dad has money and connections and a reputation as a respected surgeon." Sophie's voice shook slightly. "That counts for a lot." She was right, and we both knew it. Ethan wandered into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, looking small and tired. "Why are you both dressed up? Is it a special day?" "Sort of," I said, forcing a smile. "Mom and Sophie have some grown-up stuff to take care of. Grandma's going to take you to school today." "Where's Dad?" Ethan asked. He'd asked the same question every morning since Peter left. Each time, it broke my heart a little more. "Dad's busy with work," I said, the lie tasting bitter. "But we'll talk about it later, okay?" Ethan nodded, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. He knew something was wrong. Kids always know. My mother arrived at 7:30 to take Ethan to school. She pulled me aside before they left. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "That's my girl." She squeezed my hand. "Peter's about to learn what happens when you underestimate the women in your life. Now go show that judge what you're made of." James picked us up at 8:15. The courthouse was an imposing building downtown, all marble and authority. My legs felt weak as we climbed the steps. "Remember," James coached us as we walked through security, "answer questions directly and honestly. Don't elaborate unless asked. If Peter's lawyer tries to rattle you, stay calm. The facts are on our side." "What if they ask me how I got Dad's messages?" Sophie whispered. "Tell the truth." He left his iPad synced, and you accessed it using a password he'd shared with the family. "You didn't do anything illegal, Sophie. You just paid attention. There's no crime in that." We entered the courtroom at 8:45. Peter was already there with his lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit who immediately started whispering urgently to James. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Peter's face. He looked tired, angry, and scared. Good. He should be scared. Judge Judith Reeves entered at exactly 9 a.m. She was in her 50s, with gray hair and stern eyes that missed nothing. James had been right. She had the look of someone who'd seen every trick and lie, who wouldn't tolerate games in her courtroom. The hearing was brutal and quick. James presented our case: $73,000 stolen from a dying child's medical account. Treatment scheduled for today at 3 p.m. A father who'd used the money to buy a condo with his mistress. Peter's lawyer tried to spin it as a marital financial dispute, claimed he'd intended to replace the funds. That's when Sophie stood up and said, "That's a lie." Judge Reeves asked who she was. When Sophie said she was Peter's daughter and had proof he never planned to return the money, the judge told her to approach the bench. Sophie handed over the printed email, the one where Peter told Rebecca he was finally free of the financial burden of Ethan's treatment, where he said they could start their real life together now. The judge read it, her face darkening with each word. She asked Sophie how she'd obtained it. Sophie explained about the synced iPad, the password Peter had given her years ago, how she'd just read messages that appeared on a device she had permission to use. Then, Judge Reeves turned to Peter and asked him directly, "Did you use your son's cancer fund to buy a condo with your mistress while your child was undergoing chemotherapy?" Peter's lawyer tried to stop him, but he answered anyway. "Yes, I did, but I was going to—" "I've heard enough." Judge Reeves's voice cut through the courtroom. "I'm issuing an emergency order for the immediate transfer of $73,000 back to the medical savings account. I'm also freezing all of your personal accounts pending a full investigation." She looked at Peter with pure contempt. You're a doctor. You took an oath to do no harm, and you stole life-saving medical funds from your own son. Peter's face crumpled. For a moment, I thought he might cry. Instead, he said something I never expected. I'm sorry. Everyone froze. I'm so sorry, Peter said again, his voice breaking. I wasn't thinking clearly. The stress of watching Ethan suffer, I needed to escape. I needed to feel like I could still have a future, even if he didn't. The words hung in the air, ugly and honest. You don't get to give up on your son just because his illness is inconvenient, Judge Reeves said quietly. Now, provide the account information so we can undo what you've done. Peter gave his lawyer a look, and she reluctantly pulled out banking documents. Judge Reeves said, I want confirmation that the money has been returned by noon today. Dr. Walters, you're to have no contact with your wife or children except through legal counsel. Any violation of that order will result in immediate arrest. She looked at me then, her expression softening slightly. Mrs. Walters, I'm sorry you're going through this, but your daughter is remarkable. She may have just saved her brother's life. I couldn't speak, could only nod as tears streamed down my face. We're adjourned, Judge Reeves said. And Dr. Walters? I'm referring this case to the State Medical Board and the District Attorney's Office. What you did may be criminal. At minimum, it's conduct unbecoming a physician. Peter's lawyer tried to say something, but Judge Reeves was already leaving. The bailiff called, All rise, and she was gone. We stood in the courtroom, shell-shocked. Sophie was shaking beside me. I pulled her into a hug, and this time, she didn't try to be strong. She just cried into my shoulder while I held her. You did it, I whispered. Baby, you did it. James was on his phone immediately, coordinating with the banks. If everything goes smoothly, the money should be back in your account by 1 p.m. That gives you 2 hours before Ethan's treatment. Peter approached us, his lawyer trying to hold him back. Willa, please, I need to explain. You heard the judge, James said firmly. No contact. I'm still his father. No, Sophie said, pulling away from me to face him. You stopped being our father when you stole from Ethan. When you chose your comfort over his life. Peter looked at his daughter like he'd been slapped. Sophie, I love you. I love all of you. If you loved us, you wouldn't have done this, she said simply. She took my hand and walked away. I followed her, not looking back at the man who'd once been my husband. At 12:47 p.m., I got an alert on my phone. A deposit had been made to Ethan's medical savings account, the full amount. I showed Sophie and she finally smiled, really smiled for the first time in days. We did it, she said. You did it, I corrected. All of this, the evidence, the strategy, the courage to fight back, that was you. I learned from you, Sophie said. You never gave up on Ethan. Even when the doctor said the odds were bad, even when Dad wanted to give up, you kept fighting. I just did the same thing in a different way. At 2:30 p.m., we picked up Ethan from school and drove to the hospital. He chattered the whole way about his day, about a science project he was excited about a joke his friend told at lunch. He had no idea how close he'd come to missing this treatment, how close we'd all come to losing everything. Dr. Mendola met us in the treatment room. Mrs. Walters, I received payment confirmation this morning. We're all set for today's session. As the nurses hooked up Ethan's IV, he looked at me with those big, trusting eyes. Mom, where's Dad? He usually comes to these. I glanced at Sophie, who gave me a small nod. We'd have to tell him eventually, but not today. Today was about getting through this treatment, this day, this moment. Dad's not feeling well, I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. But Sophie and I are here. We're always here. Okay. Ethan leaned back in the chair as the medication started flowing. I like when Sophie comes anyway. She tells better jokes than Dad. Sophie laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made her sound 16 again instead of 40. You want to hear the one about the chemotherapy and the cancer cell? That sounds dark, Ethan said, but he was grinning. It is dark, but it has a happy ending. I watched my children together, Sophie entertaining Ethan with deliberately terrible medical jokes, Ethan laughing despite the poison flowing into his veins. and felt something shift inside me. We weren't whole anymore. Our family had been broken into pieces by Peter's betrayal, but maybe the pieces that remained were stronger than what we'd been before. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "How did court go?" I typed back, "We won. Treatment happening now. Tell you everything tonight." Her response was immediate. "I never doubted you. Those Walters men never knew what hit them." I smiled at that. My mother had always said I was too soft, too willing to see the best in people. Maybe Peter's betrayal had finally burned that softness out of me. Or maybe I'd just learned the difference between kindness and weakness. At 6 p.m., after Ethan's treatment was complete and he was resting comfortably in the recovery area, my phone rang. Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Division. "Mrs. Walters, I wanted to update you on our investigation. Based on the evidence your daughter provided, we're moving forward with criminal fraud charges against both Dr. Walters and Rebecca Lynn." "Both of them?" "Ms. Lynn's pharmaceutical theft operation is more extensive than we initially thought. Your daughter's investigation helped us connect her to at least 40 other cases of stolen medications. She's looking at federal charges." Detective Morrison paused. "And there's something else. Ms. Lynn is cooperating. She's providing evidence against Dr. Walters in exchange for a reduced sentence." "What kind of evidence?" "Apparently, your husband has been helping her sell stolen medications through his medical connections. He was using his D number to make the sales look legitimate. This goes way beyond just stealing from your son's account." I felt dizzy. How had I not known? How had I lived with this man for 14 years and not seen what he really was? "Mrs. Walters, are you still there?" "Yes, sorry, this is just a lot." "I understand, but I wanted you to know your husband is going to face significant legal consequences, and your daughter's work made that possible. She's a remarkable young woman." After hanging up, I told Sophie what the detective had said. Her face was unreadable. "Do you feel bad?" I asked, "about what's going to happen to your dad?" Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "I feel sad that he became someone who deserved this, but I don't feel bad that he's facing consequences." She looked at me. "Does that make me a terrible person?" "No, your father made choices, terrible choices, and now he's paying for them." "Will Ethan understand?" "Eventually." "Eventually," I said. "When he's older, when he can process what his father did. For now, we just focus on keeping him alive and healthy." Sophie nodded. Then, "Mom, I'm really tired." "I know, baby. Me too." We drove home in silence, Ethan dozing in the back seat. When we pulled into our driveway, I saw something that made my breath catch. Our front door was spray painted with red letters. "Home Wrecker." Sophie saw it too. "Rebecca," she said quietly. I called the police immediately. They came, took photos, filed a report, added it to the growing case against Rebecca Lynn, who was apparently having a breakdown as her entire life collapsed around her. "She's desperate," the responding officer said. "Desperate people do stupid things. We'll increase patrols in your neighborhood." That night, after Ethan was asleep and the front door had been cleaned as best we could manage, Sophie came into my room. "I can't sleep," she admitted. "Me neither." She climbed into bed beside me like she used to when she was little and had nightmares. We lay there in the dark, both of us processing the impossible day. "Do you think Dad will go to jail?" Sophie asked. "I don't know, maybe." "Good," she said. Then, softer, "Is it wrong that I want him to?" "I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that, sweetheart. He hurt us. He hurt Ethan. It's okay to want justice." "It doesn't feel like justice," Sophie said. "It just feels like everyone lost." She was right. There were no winners here, just survivors. Over the next few weeks, our new reality took shape. Peter was arrested on multiple charges: fraud, theft, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and several counts of insurance fraud the investigation had uncovered. His medical license was suspended pending investigation. The practice terminated his partnership. Rebecca Lynn pleaded guilty to pharmaceutical theft and agreed to testify against Peter in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was looking at 3 to 5 years instead of 10 to 15. The divorce moved forward quickly. Peter had no leverage, no moral high ground, nothing to fight with. I got full custody, the house, and the settlement I asked for. Sophie's story made local news. Teen exposes father's fraud to save brother's life. She was offered interviews, speaking opportunities, even a book deal. She turned them all down. I didn't do this for attention, she told me. I did it to protect Ethan. But she did start a blog, anonymous but detailed. A resource guide for families dealing with medical financial abuse. Warning signs to watch for. Steps to protect yourself. Resources for those already trapped in impossible situations. Within a month, her blog had helped 3 other families discover and report similar fraud. Within 3 months, a legal aid organization was using her materials as official training resources. Ethan's treatment continued. The tumor was responding. Dr. Mendola was cautiously optimistic. We weren't out of the woods, but we could finally see light through the trees. On Thanksgiving, 5 months after Peter left, the 4 of us gathered around my mother's table. Me, Sophie, Ethan, and my mother. It felt smaller than previous years, emptier, but also somehow more honest. "What are you thankful for?" my mother asked, going around the table. "I'm thankful for SpongeBob reruns and that my hair is growing back," Ethan said, rubbing his head where soft fuzz was finally appearing. "I'm thankful we're all still here," my mother said, squeezing my hand. Sophie was quiet. Then, "I'm thankful Mom taught me to be strong, even when I didn't know I was learning it." They all looked at me. "I'm thankful for second chances," I said. "For all of us." After dinner, while Ethan and my mother were watching a movie, Sophie showed me something on her laptop. "I got an email yesterday," she said, "from a woman in Ohio. Her husband drained their daughter's medical fund 6 months ago. She didn't know what to do. She found my blog and followed the steps I outlined. She just got the money back and her husband is facing charges." "Sophie, that's amazing." "She said I saved her family." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "She said her daughter is getting her treatment now because of what I wrote." I pulled her close. "You turned something terrible into something that helps people. That's not just amazing. That's heroic." "I don't feel like a hero. I just feel like someone who did what had to be done." "That's exactly what a hero is," I said. If Sophie's courage resonated with you, please subscribe. Her story isn't just about revenge, it's about a family refusing to be victims. Sometimes the youngest among us teach us the most about courage, resilience, and what it really means to protect the people we love.